Hello, everyone, and welcome back to IL Soy Advisor. I'm Kelsey Litchfield, coming to you from West Central Illinois, where it's expected to rain again today. I was out last week. My rain gauge said 2 inches, and I was told that I should leave the country more often because then maybe it will rain. Because before I left, it was dry. I come back, we had some rain, and I guess we're forecasted to get some more today. So, before we go around, I just want to do a quick USDA snapshot of July 1st crop progress report. So, ending June 30th, corn silking reached 17%, soybeans emerged 95%, soybeans blooming is 25%, and then 1% of soybeans are setting its pods. Winter wheat harvested has reached 89%. Alfalfa hay second cuttings 35%. So there's a quick snapshot on crop progress. Let's go ahead and talk around what are the corn conditions in your area, soybean conditions, what are you seeing while you're out crop scouting? Since I was out last week, what would you tell a farmer that went out of the country like I did and missed a whole week? What did I miss while I was out? Uh, Kelly, you want to start down there in Southern Illinois?
Not a thing.
Good.
It was 106 degrees in the shade. Um, we did end up getting anywhere from a half inch to an inch and a half of rain last week. Um, that, in my opinion, saved the crop at this point, or saved a lot of the crop for most people. The result of the rain coming through was we have dramatically cooled off. Highs only in the upper 80s. Yesterday morning, I think we were 59 degrees this morning. We're 60 something, 62, 63 when I got up, 65 right now. Crop condition corn V3 through R2, sometimes in the same field. But definitely in the same stretch of road, mile stretch of road. Soybeans, still replanting soybeans in places. Um, but soybeans from just emerging through R4, R3, R4. Just, I mean, the crop is everywhere. Spraying, I don't know that we'll ever get this crop sprayed. Um, Weeds, there's a lot of fields that have either got forgotten, skipped, or there's something's happened. I mean, you can't see the crop for the weeds. They're still trying to figure out how to clean those fields up. I know we have one retailer in particular that, because of one of the rain delays, he lost some of his employees, and they did not get a lot of fertilizer or field sprayed during the big push a few weeks ago. So that's been a hot topic in the countryside. Big hot topic. Wheat harvest is over. Wheat yields not as good as they predicted overall. The later the wheat, the better the yields. So early wheat 80 bushel, later wheat 100 to 120 bushel. Test weights 60 plus on the late wheat, 47 to 55 on the early wheat. Um, but I think that 190 to 100 bushel average will catch most all the wheat every place. Fungicide, I've been buzzed 3 times this morning already. Fungicide going on some corn. Um, what else? Slugs, pretty much have dried up finally, and that's mainly the last of the replanted beans. So um, that's really not much different than my last 4 weeks of updates.
Yeah, I saw a crop duster here in Knox County yesterday. Doesn't look like he was doing much, but he was doing some. All right, thanks, Kelly. Shelby, over in Champaign County.
Good morning. If you were just returning back into the country, I would tell you to scout your fields for weed pressure and go around and scout everything and figure out what your next approach would be to controlling the weeds that are still out there that were not controlled from the the post application or just emerging because we haven't had any rain to have residuals kick in. So it's becoming a disaster around here very quickly, and with this hot, dry weather, it's difficult to kill weeds. So we're struggling with that. But they're growing so quickly, and you're just not getting the larger one killed. And there's a lot of them that are a foot tall, and so you're just burning them down, and they're growing right back shortly behind that. So it's been a struggle with that. Going to be an ugly year. It's just the crop's never going to be clean around here right now. But otherwise, I mean, for what we've been through, crop does look pretty good. Corn's curling, even though we are some drier or cooler temperatures right now. But things are growing quickly. Roots are going down, so that's a good thing, and the crop is going up. We've got corn, we've got everything about like Kelly, V3, V4 to I've seen tasseling, and I could smell pollen when I was driving around in the countryside. So their corn is moving quickly. I haven't seen any crop dusters or anything yet. Maybe next week I would think there'd be some coming in. Bean wise, they're starting to slowly grow out of their ugly stage. There's starting to be some really good looking soybean fields out there that right now, while they're clean, they've looked pretty good. I think flowers are coming on well, and we've got a lot of opportunity out there still if we can keep the weed pressure down and just continue to scout. Not a lot of insect pressure. Did see some, we did find a couple rootworm beetles in a corn on corn field we went and looked at the other day when we were looking for tar spot, but did not find anything there. But otherwise, pressure in soybeans really hasn't been that heavy. Japanese beetles are territorial. Haven't seen any too bad in my area, but I've seen them around and different things. I've noticed they've been feeding on trees more than anything I've really noticed. So not too terrible at that point, but I've heard a little wheat yields, anything from 80 to 110. So a lot of range. I suppose that depends a little bit on rain amounts that the guys have received. So big differences there, but overall, we're just moving forward. There's a chance of rain starting tonight. I just looked though; they've really dissipated our chances here. Maybe a half inch. We haven't had rain since June 25th, and we ended the month of June with about 1.75 inches of rain. So we're back in the drought monitor in East Central Illinois over here.
From one extreme to the other. Thanks, Shelby.
Yes.
Stephanie down in Taylorville, Illinois.
Hello. I've been traveling as well with you, so all over. Just recently, last week, traveled up to Michigan and back. Crops don't look spectacular, to be honest, in my travels. Today I'll be heading your way, Kelsey, and Northwest to look at some fields, Northwestern Illinois. Overall, we've got no rain here. We did get maybe a couple tenths here in Taylorville, but as far as where we're farming in Montgomery County, it's Groundhog Day, basically, of last year. And this is about the time, actually, it was a little bit before now, that we got the saving rain that Kelly talked about. So we are in some weird little area that has heavy Japanese beetles. At least I haven't seen them anywhere else. If you guys have seen them, my sister-in-law is struggling with them in her yard at this point. They were fine before we went on vacation, and then came back, and the populations are really ramping up. So far, they're just in field edges. But I did jump into some fields that are full-blown pollen yesterday. Really no disease. There's a lot of insect poop out there is what I would call it. That could be, a false alarm for tar spot. So if you can, I know this is gross, but if you can scratch it off, it's not tar spot. And there was a lot of it out there. I have not seen it. And I thought about that yesterday and kind of listened, wanting to know. There's no spraying of fungicides I know of. I'll keep my eyes out today, but it just seems strange. But no fungicides going on. I still see people spraying for weeds. And we just recently sprayed some later planted beans that are just now hitting flowering, or did a week or so ago. I guess I should say I'm a week behind. So still, again, everything from V8 in corn to V or R1, I should say. And then in beans, it's everything from V4 to R2. So everywhere. And I would say for the most part, the April and the May planted beans are almost canopied. So we're getting there to help with weeds, but there's still that, we're just dry and, like Shelby said, not much residual action out there. So I would say overall, that's what I saw. We're just hoping for rain. I got my teeth cleaned yesterday and I cringed because she was complaining that it was going to rain on the 4th of July. I said, please. I said, we need the rain. So just keep hoping and praying that we can get some rain here soon.
Hey, I'll throw in there something Stephanie said too. I think the reason we're seeing the planes fly right now, most guys were not going to spray their early corn with fungicide because of the way the weather was. We did get that little bit of rain, but the deciding factor I think on flying right now is the found tar spot in White County confirmed it. So I mean it's that far south now, so that's what triggered the airplanes.
I think the one I saw yesterday was just going for a joyride. I was like, hey, can I go? I mean, coming in on the airplane into Moline, looking up above, I will say too, it did not look good from that point of view either. There were some ugly looking fields on top, so that was interesting to see too. So I was still productive while flying in an airplane. I was doing my crop report from way up above. So, all right, Eric, let's see what you have to say this morning.
Yeah, so I'm going to probably echo a lot of the same things everybody else has. Weeds continue to be tough to kill, especially in soybeans, getting those cleaned up. But, just remind everybody that watch your applications, watch your rates, watch your plant backs and everything, because there are restrictions. So just make sure we're staying on label with that type of stuff. Japanese beetles. I have actually been seeing a fair amount of Japanese beetles in corn, feeding in corn, actually, kind of skeletonizing the corn leaves in spots, not widespread, but definitely been noticeable. And then also in soybeans, we've had to treat a few fields for Japanese beetles. They've been that heavy. And then some of this early planted corn that was planted around probably the 14th, maybe even a little before the 14th of April, has actually got corn rootworm beetles out on the silks and everything, and actually, finding somewhere between 10 and 20 beetles on some of those plants. So some high numbers. So we are in the process of deploying rootworm traps and everything. So we process. And then as far as like the disease front and everything, not really finding, any like the major hitter diseases, but this year seems like this has been the year of hocus spot. I can't hardly go into a cornfield without seeing some hocus spot around. And then, did have one kind of mysterious disease pop up on the radar last week, and worked through at the U of I plant clinic and got that identified. So that was a little bit of an oddity, finding some bacterial leaf streak in a field. So, but with that, corn, like everybody else, corn is all over the place. Still finding issues where, the shortcomings of this spring, whether, anhydrous spring applied anhydrous, some issues with that, or even shallow rooted corn, just because of, restricted root growth and everything from less than ideal conditions this spring and everything. So really encourage growers. Some of the other updates I've been giving to radio stations I work with is that, we need to continue to keep scouting fields. It's going to be very key, especially as we go into pollination. And I would hate for anybody to, kind of turn a blind eye over this holiday week and then come back on Monday morning next week and there's a train wreck. I think we're probably maybe right on the verge of maybe some of these diseases blowing up, especially if we get some more rain this week and everything. It may start really flaring up next week. So I would just encourage everybody to stay vigilant and keep scouting fields.
Thanks, Eric. Drew, up in northern Illinois, how are you this morning?
Good. I apologize for hopping on just a touch late here. I'm going to echo basically everything that Eric said. I'm kind of focused a little bit north of Route 80. That's where I've spent a decent amount of time here the last few days, and the Japanese beetle pressure is immense. I was in a field that yesterday that I was in a week before. Far worse feeding, skeletalization of the leaf, just like Eric said. Very concerned with that around silk clipping. So remember, if we get silk clipping within a ½ inch of the ear, that's threshold. And of course, that does matter a little bit more around where we're at with weather patterns. If we're getting dry, heat stress also kind of exacerbates that issue. But I'm actually more concerned about that right now than I am fuller diseases that I'm seeing at this particular moment. Just like what's been echoed, I haven't seen a lot of diseases developing in person, but the way this year is going, that can change really quick. Actually, I think maybe a little bit different than what anyone talked to is we are actually seeing very heavy larval feeding on the roots of corn plants from corn rootworm. So I was in 2 fields yesterday, and basically there is a little bit of a trend that we're seeing. So if it was a non-rootworm product last year in 23, it did not have a foliar insecticide sprayed at VT, basically no VT treatment at all, fungicide or insecticide. Basically, there was nothing out there to prevent those females from laying just a massive amount of eggs. And we're seeing, I mean, we're pre-tassel and we're already seeing root lodging. I forgot to run up to my truck to get, I was going to do some show and tell with some of the roots that we pulled, but massive root feeding. So it's going to be a very, very big issue to manage those fields here the rest of the year with what we're seeing. So just kind of a little shout out if you're going into corn on corn, if you're planning to go to corn next year in the field, even into 25, there's management things that we need to talk about in 24 that we're kind of trying to go through. So like Eric said, starting to put some traps out and start monitoring the adult populations. And also we can kind of worry about those a little bit with the silk clipping portion as well. Outside of that, water hemp isn't dying in a lot of fields. I'm kind of tracing that, I think, back to adjuvant a little bit. It seems like in fields that are speckled a little bit more, we're seeing better kill rates than the ones that there's no crop response at all. It seems like if there's no crop response, there's almost no weed response. So those weeds do seem to be a little hardened off. But outside of that, just kind of watching it grow. Nice flowers coming on, and actually was able to count a few small, probably a technical name for it that I'm forgetting, but small ears. And we're seeing some 16er rounds, like 18er rounds that are forming. So there's a lot to change between now and then, but it's kind of cool to start seeing a little bit of an ear.
Yeah, we're getting into that time of season. July 1st. Well, technically now July 2nd already. It's flying by, that's for sure. Karen in Goodfield, anything new that you want to add that hasn't been discussed so far?
Well, I am not in a dry spot. Since the last time we talked, I've had 3.6 inches. So that I suppose is a little bit different, but yeah, have been fairly wet. So I talked to a client yesterday in eastern Iowa, and he's had 6 inches in the same time. And across east central Iowa, there's a lot of lodged corn because the rootworm pressure is so heavy. So a lot of those high winds, there's a lot of goosenecked corn right now. So I did go into Iowa this last week. The hillsides are burnt up. Obviously, you can see a lot of mistakes that were made at planting. Through your area, Kelsey, I could see the unevenness just from the interstate and didn't have to fly above. But I talked to a group of farmers last night. We had a meeting and we were just on the south side of Bloomington, very dry. So we're just now harvesting wheat this week, yesterday, hopefully some today, but we are expected to get more rain. And since we are so wet, we probably will actually get some. But a lot of the questions I've had, same, what do I do with water hemp? Well, you don't have a lot of options. So other than that, but yeah, we are sitting wet right here, which is good because we may not have planted in the best conditions. But the ponds that we had finally got rid of were back this past week. So.
Yeah, I looked at the radar earlier this morning and that Cedar Rapids area is getting pounded with more rain this morning. So it just keeps getting worse out in that area for sure. Thanks, Karen. And Craig, we want to round us out.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to what's been said. I was going to say that, as tassels are starting to form, you can actually see again the unevenness that's in the field, so you can tell where things were better or things are worse. I think the other thing to watch for is we've been talking about Japanese beetles. I've seen them hit and miss where in my travels, I was around Pasodum yesterday and I was actually in a breeding field. So, hundreds of different hybrids in the field, and yet I could find hybrids that they liked it. So it was interesting. I hadn't seen that before in corn, but they do that to trees, but I've never seen it where they actually enjoyed one hybrid versus another. And it was to the row. You could tell. Not a lot of hybrids out there, but it was something. I don't think it was a spray kind of thing, but interesting to see that. I do see a lot of weeds about anywhere I go, either emerging or weren't killed, so can hit that one again. The other thing I was wondering about is spider mites. As hot and dry as it's been, I wondered if anybody had seen that or thought about it. I think it was a thing I had heard about, and then we kind of got that rain that came through a couple weeks ago, and I think it kind of squashed a little bit of that, but was curious if anybody had seen that. And I have not, but it was just something, the hot and dry weather that we've been seeing was something I kind of attribute those to. But yeah, I haven't seen any fungicides being applied, but I would expect them to be happening fairly soon. But yeah, those were kind of my updates. I think I don't really have anything to add to what's already been said. I think they hit it fairly well. Things are starting to look a little bit more uniform across the countryside, and the beans are starting to look a little bit better, but I'm afraid the weeds are going to come back through here soon. A couple of weeks, we'll start seeing those that are just under the canopy. They're going to poke through. So I was also noticing that corn seems a little shorter than what I was expecting, but as I think about it, as wet as we were and then as hot and dry as it went, it does make a little bit of sense that it's having that oh crap moment. I need to get into reproductive and go. So just something I notice when you work on short corn, it's something I pay attention to. So.
Yeah. I noticed that too. Stephanie and I were in Western Illinois the week before, and she goes, "Look, that corn's tasseled." I'm like, "That's too short." I was like, "Are we sure that's not sweet corn?" She goes, "No, that's field corn." I go, "Wow, that's really short." But that was over a week ago. We saw that field tasseled, and that was in Western Illinois. But they got off to a good start this year, before a lot of other people did. So I guess it wasn't too surprising. Anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about, or anything that should be on farmers' radar coming up? I know, Eric, you said keep on scouting, don't turn a blind eye. Anything else that people want to add into this coming week?
The one thing I was going to add is watch those fields that are either, early planted, so they're ahead of most everything. Those are going to be target fields, I would expect, for Japanese beetles, and then those that are way behind, they're also going to be lingering out there, kind of a target for whatever pest may be out there. That's the other thing I was going to add.
And even to Craig's point there, I've even seen that in a field.
So yeah, it's in the field.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a field that's ahead of other ones in that area, I've seen preferential feeding, but also inner field where if you got uneven tassel, I mean, they'll destroy 5% of the silks. I mean, and then it'll lead to really inconsistent pollination. But yeah, that's a really good point, Craig.
And then one thing I will note that, as you know, especially like corn, and I'm sure soybeans were going to definitely benefit, is just that corn tends to be a little bit more showy. But a lot of this corn that as we're continuing to go into tassel and everything, I continue to see sulfur deficiencies out there. Last year we had sulfur deficiencies for a different reason, because of lack of mineralization, because cool, dry conditions in a lot of places. And then this year it seems to be almost like a direct inverse. Maybe we've maybe lost sulfur from mineralization this year in some cases because of the wet conditions this spring. But encourage growers that if you're seeing that leaf striping in your field and you're not able to 100% identify it, go get a tissue test. Tissue tests are cheap in the grand scheme of things. and get it narrowed down. And then, would recommend that, maybe include that in your next year's growing plan. It's probably a little bit too late to, probably not be able to get enough of a product out there, but, sulfur deficiencies is one thing that, continue to really see. And that, and it really shows on those guys that are not, or, growers or operations that are not using sulfur in some form or another.
I'll add to that too, that if you're going to take the time to do a tissue test, regardless of what you're doing it for, pull a soil sample at the same time, the
Yeah,
same location.
definitely.
Otherwise, the tissue test isn't worth the paper it's printed on.
Yep, I agree.
And I think in a previous podcast, I picked up on something you said, Eric, too, because I was finding it as well, was when some of it was, I was seeing sulfur deficiency during that rapid growth stage. And I think you said you had dug some roots too. And I was finding it on much like underdeveloped roots too, in
Yep.
certain stages. Just that I called it the awkward teen stage. But yeah, always dig the root too to check that out as well. Especially with all this rootworm larva feeding and everything else going on. I mean, all the above, you can wreak havoc on a plant.
Yeah, something else to throw in here too is some of the this ultra late planted corn, this June planted corn. A lot of guys that got out there and got their nitrogen on in April have been concerned about nitrogen loss. And so, a tissue test will not tell you how much nitrogen is in the soil. And a nitrate test only tells you how much nitrate's in the soil. It doesn't tell you how much ammonia. And if you put on anhydrous ammonia and you use a stabilizer, you probably still got a lot of ammonia out there. So pull available nitrogen sample for both nitrate and ammonia. And
Yeah.
Stephanie said, dig the plant and look at the roots, because guess what? Chances are you've got a lot of nitrogen there that your roots are not able to get to because the plant's root bound, or it just hasn't developed enough yet to get to that anhydrous that's still 4 or 5 inches deeper in the profile.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, a lot of the soil tests and everything I've looked at lately, as far as with available plant available nitrogen, a lot of that nitrogen is still there. In fact, it's just that if you are seeing nitrogen deficiencies, I wouldn't automatically appoint or assume that you lost it. It could be because of restricted root growth, and I'm seeing it still in the upper foot of the soil, and then there's still, and then if it's not in the upper foot, it's in the second foot. And so, I mean, it's there. It's just, are the roots being able to get to it?
All right, we had some great conversation today and reports, so thank you so much. Anything else last minute to add?
Yeah, I think
Nope.
one last thing to add while we're talking about it is we've been ultra focused on trying to get this crop in, and we're already starting to hear rumors about problems for 2025 down here, as far as supply and so on, pricing and everything. And so, my word to my customers has been, look, don't, the coffee shop again is the rumor mill. And social media is not the place to get good agronomic advice. Actually talk to your input suppliers, actually talk to people in the know about your seed, about your fertilizer and so forth. We just don't need any more misery on this crop by looking forward to the next misery. Let's get one over with before we get too wrapped up in the next one.
Amen. Well, again, thank you all so much. Hope you have a great 4th of July holiday. Stephanie, we pray that it rains. There's up here near the Quad Cities, they've canceled their fireworks display because of river flooding. So it's flooding out of the Mississippi River, out of its banks in some places. So
Hey, Kelsey, I'm going to
yeah.
correct you. Don't pray for rain. Pray for favorable weather.
Okay.
Karen
Depending on the
doesn't need any
area.
more rain. We need rain. Pray for favorable weather.
Yeah, depending on the area. Yeah, definitely.
And then
All right, well,
if you're praying for rain, pray for my bank account too, would you?
okay.
So
Put that on the list.
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. We'll be back next Thursday, back to our regular scheduled programming, as one might say. So thanks all and have a happy 4th of July.